Good morning, everyone. At this time, I will call the June 28th work session of the Harnett County Board of Commissioners to order, and I will ask Commissioner Johnson to lead our Pledge of Allegiance and have our invocation.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Remain standing and pray with me, please. Heavenly Father, I pray for all the citizens of Harnett County and ask for your blessings for their families, especially for our youth, anyone seeking your guidance for problems they may have. Please touch anyone in this room and their families that have a personal situation that they need prayer for. Also, we pray for our country as well as this world as we go through more turbulent times all the time. Please help Harnett County as we come together as a body to make the right decisions, the right reasons for the county's citizens. We ask for your forgiveness for anything when we step out off the beaten path of life. We ask these things in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, Commissioner Johnson. All right, at this time, Mr. Sykes, you want to come up and talk about adding Sherman Pines Drive to the NCDOT roads system?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Commissioner. Give me the board. This is a request from NCDOT. Again, I think we saw one last month, and they'll probably continue to come down. And this road has been, it's a small subdivision up on 401 North and towards the Wake County line. It's been built out for, are we good, 6-7 years or more? It's one of the ones that the developer built out and then folded, and then the roads were just never taken over by DOT. Luckily, the roads were built to good conditions. So after working with staff and some citizens out there, DOT has found it feasible to take it over into their maintenance program. So they just want to make sure that the county's okay with it, and we are. And again, we'll definitely continue to work with DOT, and then hopefully get some stuff to Melissa to kind of streamline this process. As we see more, theoretically, it should be just a simple process.
Anyone got any questions for Mr. Sykes? Is the consensus of the board to turn this over to NCDOT? We'll turn that over. We'll get this resolution passed in our next meeting, which is Monday? Tuesday.
Yes, sir. Perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. And this will be on the consent agenda. Mr. Smith, you want to come up and talk about the cargo trailers for the Fire Chiefs Association?
Yeah, good morning.
Morning.
We've got two 27-year-old trailers, small cargo trailers, 5x10. We used to use to haul emergency supplies with that. We've replaced with some grant money for some larger trailers, and we've had some interest from our Chiefs Association, in particular Spout Springs Fire, who they house the Honor Guard for the Chiefs Association, and Boys Creek Fire, who does the Swift Water team for the county also. And we're looking at donating those two trailers for that usage with y'all's permission.
Any comments or questions concerning this matter? All right. Thank you for that, Mr. Smith. If you will add that to the consent agenda, we'll approve it on Tuesday.
All right.
Okay, let's talk about the Boys Creek Fire and Rescue Building.
Yes, I've received a proposal from Boys Creek. They are looking at demolishing a small portion. It was an addition to the building probably 30 or 40 years ago, very small portion they use for storage. And they're looking at replacing that with a 45 by 50 by 14 metal building with three 12 by 12 bay doors and an 8 by 8 bay door in the back of the vehicle. That would give them 3 bays for apparatus, ambulances, and also 2 to store their boats for swift water. The demolition costs actually, that takes care of removing all the concrete and brick, tearing out the existing storm drains and replacing those storm drains, concrete pad in the facility, prepping the facility for being built. And then the rest of that cost is the actual building itself, which is $133,786. They're not requesting any additional funds from the county for this. Do you have any questions?
Any questions about this project?
So if they're not requesting additional funds, then they have funds on hand to handle the
Yes, they
project?
do. They have no funds at all. This is going to give them 3 more bays to be able to. They're kind of tight right now. They've got equipment piled on top of each other.
Them a trailer they want to build in us.
Yeah.
There you. What are they gonna want after the building?
What's that?
What are they gonna need after the building?
Oh, Lord knows. Lord knows.
It's always a need.
It's people usually.
Well, if there's no objections, we'll put this on the consent agenda for Tuesday, and thanks, Sarah.
All right, thank you.
Ms. McCauley, you want to talk about library consolidation?
Yes, sir. I have a lot to talk about this morning. I have a lot of information to present to you, so just hang on, and I will be happy to answer anything at any point during this conversation. So during our last update, which was April the 25th, we reviewed the history of our consolidation efforts, and we introduced you to a draft agreement that was created by our attorneys here. And we asked for your direction. Did you accept that draft? And you did, and you provided guidance to go ahead and share that with the municipalities, and we did so. Following that meeting, those drafts were provided to the town managers of Coates, Irwin, Andrew, and Dunn. And after review and consultation with their respective boards, there were a few requests for clarifications and some revisions. So it kind of went back and forth a little bit. But once all their questions were answered and concerns were addressed, the revised agreement was sent back to town officials in review and consideration. And as of this morning, we have commitments from the towns of Andrew, the town of Coates, and the town of Irwin. So we have not heard yet from Dunn. We do not know what their position is on this yet. So today I'm going to briefly just review what library consolidation is, why we have been and continue to pursue a consolidated library system, where we are now, how we will move forward, and who will be involved. So library consolidation, as you know, is the merging of our municipal operated libraries into the Harnett County library system. And in 2016, municipal officials initiated discussions regarding the creation of a single county operated library system for the purpose of improving access to library materials and services for all our residents. And in 2018, the library's new master plan also identified consolidation as a worthy goal, as it would allow the county to create consistently exemplary patron experiences by increasing personnel, increasing budgets, expanding hours of operation, and developing a more robust level of programming for all ages. However, despite multiple attempts to move consolidation forward, we came to an impasse between the county and the municipals as to how we should do that. And so then we had COVID and everything quieted down for a little while. And then back at the end of last year, we were asked to revisit this subject, and here we are. And actually, we've gained some momentum, and we actually have an agreement, and possibly your consideration for approval on that agreement today or next week. So I'm not going to read the agreement word for word, but I do want to go over some highlights of the agreement with you. Upon execution of the agreement, and I do believe the agreement is in your packet. Yes, I do see that. The county will assume ownership, control, responsibility, and oversight of the municipal libraries. The county will be responsible for offering and providing support for appropriate levels of programming, operation hours, library collections as determined by the county administration and the municipal branch manager. It is not our intention to go in and take command of their current programming, or their schedules or their operations, but it is, however, our intent to make sure that they have the resources available that are necessary to provide adequate services, programs, and hours of operation. Upon execution of this agreement, their library collections, books, reference material, and furniture that's currently owned by the municipals will transfer to the county and will remain county property until it reaches the end of its usable life. Most technology used for library operations currently belongs to the county. We provide that to them, and so that will remain the same. IT equipment, computer, software services, licenses, that will remain ours. All buildings, grounds, or other facilities used by library branches will remain the property of municipalities. Lease agreements. There will be a lease agreement between each municipality and the county that's forthcoming, but based on the terms of this agreement, we anticipate the lease agreements will solidify that there will be no building rental fees and that the county will pay all the utilities. If there's a shared space in these buildings, and as an example of that, Coates Library, Coates Library does share space with the town hall. Irwin also shares space with a community center and a museum. In a case like that, we will pay a pro rata amount or share based on the square footage. Lease renewal or renovations of any existing facilities must be voted on by both municipal and county boards.
Excuse me, I believe Andrew shares space also.
They do with their boardroom, so that will also be taken into consideration.
Right. Okay. So the municipality will maintain ownership of the building.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Who's responsible for the interior and who's responsible for the exterior of the building?
They will be responsible for groundskeeping, outside facilities, systems. We will be responsible for inside janitorial, cleaning, minor repairs.
Let's say if the building needs a new roof, for example, is that the municipality's?
Yes. That would be the municipalities, Mr. Chairman. Essentially, all major systems, including the exterior, would be responsibility of the municipalities. Common shared areas, since all these buildings are, share common space, that'd be the responsibility of municipalities. We would just be responsible for what is inside the library proper, with regard to essentially consumables, taking care of waste, changing the light bulbs, things of that nature. Electrical, plumbing, fixtures at work, that would still be on them as a major system. All of that will be forthcoming in all of the leases that we enter into, essentially saying that we will rent for $0 and pay our pro rata share of all utilities.
Well, that question, it was not. I've been asked that question, and I wanted to make sure I had the right answer. I thought was the answer, because that's typically, like in a shopping center, if you rent a space.
Yes, sir.
You're responsible for the inside, the owner's responsible for the outside.
Yes, sir. It'll be very, very similar to what you find in a common commercial lease, with regards to, the delegation of the responsibilities there.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If that's true, and if we only have one town municipalities that has not agreed to sign on to this, and that is what? Done.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
they are agreeing to accept the responsibility of the whole building outside and all of that.
Can you ask that one more time? I'm not sure I quite understood.
So they have agreed to accept the responsibility for the outside of the building. And that means if something happens to the building or whatever, it's their responsibility to fix that.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
Now,
Yeah,
Dunn, if they don't enter the agreement, Dunn will continue in their interlocal agreement just as they are now. We will continue the same relationship that we currently have with any library that doesn't choose to join the consolidation.
Okay, well, I guess they can, no one doing this, they probably can afford that, so, you answered my question.
Okay. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about library staff. Municipal library staff will become county employees. There are currently 10 municipal employees in the 3 library branches that we're talking about, with plans to hire an additional 2 part-time staff for Irwin. If Dunn joins, there will be a total of 16. These employees, as well as any new hires for the municipal libraries, will be subject to the county personnel ordinance. Upon your approval of the agreement, we will begin transitioning these employees over to the county system. Their salaries will be assigned an appropriate pay grade within the county's salary grade table consistent with their job title and their job duties. If the municipal salary is above or within the salary range of the grade in which it falls in the county's pay grade table, then the employee will maintain the salary with the county. Any employee who is brought on with a salary below the position grade minimum will receive a salary grade equal to the grade minimum salary. So this basically means no one's going to make less by coming to the county. If they're making a certain amount here, even if that's not where it would land them in our pay grade table at the very beginning, they will maintain whatever they're getting at the municipality. They will also accumulate leave at a rate that takes into account their years of service with the municipality, other counties, or North Carolina governmental agencies. All accumulated sick leave will transfer in, the vacation leave will not. The municipality will be responsible for paying them out any remaining balances of vacation leave in accordance with their respective vacation leave ordinance. All transitioned employees will undergo a 6-month probation period as outlined in the Harnett County Personnel Ordinance. So now on to finances. The municipal library's operating budget will transition from municipality to county over a 3-year period. I've worked very closely with library staff and municipal libraries to determine their budget needs, and I am with their help have developed a 22-23 budget for each. And I will go over all those budgets in my next presentation in more detail. These first year budget figures will be factors in a 3-year financial transition from municipal to county funding for libraries. In year 1, the municipality will pay the lesser of 2/3 of their 22-23 operating budget or the total amount of their 21-22 budget. If the consolidation goes into effect after the start of the fiscal year, the municipality will pay a prorated portion of the lesser of 2/3 of their 2022-23 operating budget or the total amount of their 21-22 budget. And I know that sounds very confusing, but I'm going to give you a good example in a few minutes of how that's going to work. That's going to make that crystal clear for you. In year 2, the municipality will pay the lesser of 1/3 of their 22-23 operating budget or the total amount of their 21-22 budget. And in year 3, the county will assume full responsibility for funding and operating the budgets for consolidated branch libraries. Budgeting after year 1, the county and municipality will work together to ensure that they are appropriately funded each year using the county's process for identifying budget needs, including expansions and capital improvement projects. So they will go through the same system that we go through. Now on to the Library Board of Trustees. In Harnett County, there are 2 other Library Board of Trustees besides our Board of Trustees. That was Anger and Dunn. They both have a Library Board of Trustees. And upon execution of this agreement, those boards will be disbanded, and everyone will fall under our board, which currently has great representation for them. So currently, our Library Board of Trustees will be the sole advisory committee. The board is currently made up of 11 citizens and a commissioner. Each of the municipal libraries is currently represented by 1 person appointed by the municipal. Branch libraries located at Anderson Creek and Boone Trail also have a representative, and the remaining 5 seats are at-large seats with representatives from each of the 5 voting districts. So it's just a fair game with our board. So there's really not any changes that I think that we'll have to make with our library board. For insurance coverage and indemnification, municipals are to pay and maintain insurance coverage against damage or loss for the municipal buildings, and the county will pay and maintain insurance coverage for the contents, general liability, and workers' compensation and coverage for staff, accident insurance for patrons, and coverage for vehicles used to provide services. The county will also maintain flood insurance on contents of the libraries if necessary. Indemnification terms state that each party will mutually hold harmless the other parties, their officers, agents, and employees from and against all loss, cost, damage, and expense and liability caused by negligent acts of omission resulting in bodily injury, including death and disease, or damage or destruction to property. With approval, we anticipate that this agreement will become effective on August 1st. Any recommendations for amendments to be forwarded will be forwarded to each of the parties in writing with a 30-day period for consideration given, and any disagreements will be resolved by a committee of appointed representatives consisting of at least one employee from each of the government units involved, and then by legal counsel if necessary. All right, so let's talk about termination. This agreement may be terminated by either the municipality or county. The termination involving one municipality does not terminate the agreements with other municipalities. Any notice of termination must be made at least 6 months prior to the start of the next fiscal year, and termination and transfer will occur at the conclusion of the fiscal year in which the notice of termination was received. If the county terminates, all personnel, materials, books, collections originally provided by the municipality or purchased during the first 2 years of the agreement, as well as utilities, assignable contracts, and other non-information technology goods and services will revert back to the municipality. Information technology goods, those are the items that we already purchased anyway, will remain the property of the county. And materials purchased for the branch in the 3rd year or later will remain the property of the county and be made available for purchase by the municipality at replacement cost. If the municipality terminates, the same terms apply. And of course, this agreement will supersede any other current agreements we have with the branches. So do any of you have any questions about anything we discussed here?
Just a couple of questions, if I may. The employees that would be grandfathered in, were they making more than what would align on our county pay scale? They would hold that until the scale caught up with them, I'm assuming.
Kimberly, this may be a good question for you.
In other words, they would hold that until the scale caught up with them in terms of experience, or would they still be eligible for raises that would occur, keeping them?
Well, if they come up under the personnel policy, then they would come up under the performance plan, so then they would get the percentage increase each year, and then.
So they would remain at a higher pay than their colleagues in other.
Quite possibly. It was my understanding from the discussion that if they're brought in and they're within that, our defined grade, pay grade, that they would not make less. They would just drop in at their same salary. And then they would start like everyone else, and they would get the performance increases.
Right. My question is those that would come in at a higher salary than the
quite possibly. I've not really looked at the salaries and compared those with the other county staff. I'm assuming that's what you're asking, how their salary ranks with everyone else. I've not really looked at that very closely.
Would you research that for us so that we'll have that information prior to voting on that at the next meeting? Please?
And I will say, Mr. Matthews, like if I look at each individual one, the only one that would really impact would be the Dunn director, because he has been with the Dunn Public Library for so many years. So he would have, if they came in, he would have been at the upper side of his pay grade because of his years of service. I don't think that it's going to impact a lot with the ones we're bringing in. They're mostly newer employees, so they're not way up at the top of their scale. So I don't think it's going to have a huge financial impact.
And that kind of leads into my second question. Should the municipality that's not agreed so far choose not to take place at this time, what is included in this? And I apologize, I read, but I can't remember exactly. But down the road, should they decide to come in, how was that addressed in here?
I don't think it's necessarily addressed in this agreement, but it's my understanding that they can come in at some point. I don't know that we have given them a cutoff date, that if you don't come by this date, then you're not welcome. I don't think we discussed that.
So in other words, the same criteria that are
Yes.
extended now would
Yes, sir.
be there for perpetuity. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes, sir.
Yes. They would start in the same, they would follow the same criteria. If they come 6 months from now, a year, I mean, I think that, from talking with the town manager, or the city manager, they intend to take a look at this. It just hasn't been put on their agenda at this time.
Thank you.
I have a question, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind.
Yes, sir.
Mr. McCauley, tell us about the mobile library. How was that affected? Is there plans to get more than one truck?
Talking about our bookmobile?
Yes.
So we have a bookmobile in our capital improvement plan, and we are saving money for that. We are going to continue saving money until we can get one that will be adequate to serve this entire county. But we do not have one ordered or in place. We're planning probably within the next couple of years to apply for an LSTA grant to help fund bookmobiles. They are incredibly expensive. And again, we are putting some capital funds away to be able to help with that expense. But we do not have a plan moving forward right yet as to what that's going to be.
All right, thank you, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
Any further questions? Yes, ma'am.
I think Mr. Matthews, Commissioner Matthews, and have answered questions that I wanted to answer, but I just want some clear understanding of those municipalities that have not agreed or will not agree to come up under the plan. In the situation with the employees and the employee's salary, I think that, if the county employees get increases in pay, they will fall upon the ones that's in this consolidation agreement, will fall upon that agreement for our county employees. Is that not right?
They will, as far as they will follow our policies and our procedures, correct?
Procedure, right. So we won't have any responsibility as far as salaries, benefits, and pay for those that does not fall upon our agreement, like the ones that the municipality that decide not to come into our
That's right.
on our plan, our consolidation plan.
Yes, ma'am. They will continue to operate exactly as they are now.
That's not our responsibility.
It's not our responsibility.
I just want to make that clear. I don't think that's really defined here legally. I don't think that's really defined legally that we have no responsibility to those employees that fail to come upon a consolidation agreement. Our only responsibility is to those that have agreed to fall under the consolidation.
That's correct.
If a municipality decides not to join the consolidated library system, they will continue to operate just like they're operating now. All the expenses, everything will be on that municipality. They will still have book swaps, books going back and forth from the county library
That's
to
right.
them. And will we continue to provide them with computers and things like
Yes, sir.
that, like we do now?
Everything will remain the same.
Everything will remain the same.
I totally understand that, but my question is on the salaries. I think we need to make that more broader and make that more understandable in the agreement. What can happen if that comes up? We won't have. It won't be our responsibility. I know that, but I was just thinking maybe we need to make that a little broader.
From my understanding, unless they sign this agreement, their current interlocal agreement will stand.
Okay.
And that
Right, these
explain that.
consolidation agreements are only for those that enter into it, so if you don't enter into it, there'll be no point in putting in language saying that if you don't enter in, you're responsible for your employees, because Dunn isn't gonna sign this. Until they agree to come onto this, they don't sign, they don't enter into this consolidation agreement, only those who are entering in. So we have an interlocal agreement with Dunn, with all the current libraries. Of course, the ones that join, those will terminate per this contract.
I understand what you're saying.
But we don't have to spell out in the consolidation agreement that we're not
No,
responsible.
no, I don't think, I think we have spelled out our consolidation agreement. What's in the consolidation plan spells out for everybody that joins the consolidation. That's what I'm saying. But under these terms, for those municipalities, you don't have but one. And it's just me, I'm not a lawyer or whatever, but I understand the nature of people and how people feel about things. I just said it needs to be, I think, from my part, but that's you are the lawyer, and you brought up the agreements and all, but I don't want any municipality that don't come in up under the plan. It's not necessarily about them, it's about the employees that work for those municipalities. How they gonna feel if the county employees get increases in benefits and increases in pay, knowing they need to know that that won't happen to them. They will not inherit anything if the municipality fails to come up under the agreement. That's all I'm saying.
And I think that'd be made clear to Dunn's manager and their board that when this is discussed, if they don't enter into it, that they're on their own on this. Their employees are still theirs. They do not, they'll get raises based on Dunn's ordinance, however they handle that. But our employees are our employees.
Right.
They'll
I agree. I agree with that, and I'm not trying to broaden this or keep this conversation going, but I know things that can cause problems with the employees. I just feel that we need to spell out exactly what to expect from the county more clearly, and you may have done that, so I'm through with it.
Anyone else have any questions or comments? So, I guess, is the consensus of the board that we would approve this agreement? Or do we need additional changes, or?
Mr. Chairman, I would like to get that information about my original question
Okay.
about the grandfathering in and whether they continue to make more than their peers would, or is that something where they stay until the schedule catches up with them? So I would like to see us leave this as a standalone so we can get that information before we're making the decision at the next meeting, please.
Okay, yes, sir.
In the intent we have right now that we've communicated to each of the municipalities is that we were planning to approve this at the July 18th meeting. And so we will add that information back to the work session prior to on July 14th. I think that's the date. And so we'll bring it back to the work session and then approve it. It's July 12th, excuse me. So July 12th, we'll put it on a work session to answer the questions from Commissioner Matthews and any other questions you may have in that time frame. And then our intent is to take action on this at July 18th.
Okay.
Because codes will be approving theirs, I believe it's on the 14th. So then we'll have the three known, and then potentially the city of Dunn may take action as well between now and then. So we'll have all of that information available to us.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
we'll bring that back on the 12th.
Thank you.
And Mr. Chairman, I agree wholeheartedly with Commissioner Matthews because it kind of addressed the issue that I was. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll move this to the July 12th work session then. Okay. All right.
All right. So our next discussion is about this consolidation budget. So the consolidation plan consists of 5 separate budgets, one for each library branch and one for the main branch. Each branch budget was developed specifically for the library with their specific needs, available space for collection growth, current staffing, as well as historical and recent circulation, computer usage, programming, and patron visit statistics. And we closely examined their budgets, translated their object budget codes to how they would transfer over to the county object budget codes. We identified any deficiencies and focused on any areas of potential growth. So we took this information and we developed what we would consider a sensible year one budget for each location. So this information was then presented to, at that time, it was the interim county manager, Mr. Wood, who suggested we move forward with a phased-in budget in which the towns contribute a portion of the budget for the first 2 years of the consolidation to help ease the burden of the significant cost. And as explained in the agreement, this phased-in formula prescribes that the municipality pay for 2/3 of the recommended 22-23 budget, with the county paying 1/3. If the municipality's library budget was less than the 2/3 of the recommended budget, they would be allowed to pay the full amount of their own 21-22 budget. And the reason for this is, I'll use Coates as an example. Coates' budget for this past year was around $38,000. Well, their new budget is close to $130,000. Actually, it's $146,000. So 2/3 of that budget is more than what they paid this year. And obviously, they can't pay that. If they could pay that for their libraries, they would have probably been paying that all along. So we can't expect them to pay more than what they're currently paying for their budget. So that was a recommendation moving forward, is to allow them to pay their full budget for that 21-22 year that they actually paid. And then the next year we'd look at it again. Is the 1/3 budget more? And if it's not, then we would do the same thing. Okay, so in year two, the municipalities are to pay 1/3 of the 22-23 budget, with the county paying 2/3. And if the municipality's library budget was less than 1/3 of the recommended budget, they would be allowed to instead pay the full amount of their own 21-22 budget. Same thing, and I'm going to give you a good example of that in just a moment. We then met with you, the commissioners, and then with municipal administrations to explain the basics of the revised plan and to vet interest. And after garnering support from everyone, we met with you. We continued our efforts by initiating the creation of this draft agreement. So in addition to the agreement, your packet includes a budget for each library. I'm not going to review these line by line, but I think it would be helpful to just provide you a snapshot of each of the budgets, an explanation, and what our goals are for each of these locations. Please keep in mind that there are some unknown variables in this budget. So let's first take a look at Anger. So Anger is actually currently adequately funded. Their programs and services are pretty much at capacity. The county's goal for the Anger Public Library is to maintain their current level of service. Anger currently has 3 full-time and 1 part-time staff member, but they're currently working to onboard 2 additional part-time staff. The total salaries and benefits for the town of Anger would be $212,000, $212,087. Office supplies, $4,900. Program and supplies and food and provisions would be around close to $12,000. Their book collections would be $22,500. These are all basically what they actually have in their budget this time. They're not getting more from the county. It's basically keeping things pretty status quo for them. So if you look down at the bottom at the town of Anger's contribution, their recommended budget from us is $268,584. And their approved budget for 21-22 is $236,000. Now, they did get some more things in this year's budget, and that's why we bumped up their recommended budget to match what they were getting this year. But their approved budget last year was $236,057. So we take that formula that we just discussed, and in 22-23, this upcoming year, the county would pay 1/3 of that the recommended budget, which comes up to be almost $90,000. And the town of Anger would pay 2/3, which comes up to be about $180,000. And year two, those numbers reverse. We would pay the $180,000, and the town of Anger would contribute the almost $90,000. And in year three, we would take all. We would assume all that budget. All right. Any questions about Andrew?
Yes, Ms. McCall, I believe I heard you say that feel like Andrew's adequately funded, and a recommended budget of 268.5, over the 21-22 of 236,057. So is that difference there due to the two part-time people they hope to hire? Is that how that came into play, or how was that?
Not that much. It wasn't, because the two part-time people that they're hiring, they're only going to, I think all their part-timers together is 41.5 hours. So they're not even really truly two complete full-time employees. Most part-time employees for the library work 29 hours a week. So they're basically taking a position and splitting it. A lot of that comes in from the budget that they proposed for this upcoming year, based on some needs that they identified that they had, and we just made those adjustments the best that we could into this new budget, so that they didn't lose out by
Very
coming
good.
to the county.
Thank you for that.
All right.
This year, they've got a budget of $236,000, and they are proposing 268.5. What percentage increase is that?
I do not have my calculator with me. Anyone have a calculator?
I'll work on
While he's doing that, I can tell you that about $3,000 would be in salaries where they got pay increases. Also, there's also a difference in benefits. Benefits make a huge difference. So what we calculated based on our formulas for benefits equaled $29,218, and theirs was significantly less than that. So that sometimes transfers a little differently too.
How do these salaries stack up against county salaries?
They are, well, we don't have a branch manager at the main branch. This is the first time we've ever had a branch manager at this level in our system. So we pretty much just wrote this entire job description for them. So as far as the manager's job, we don't really have anything to compare it to. But what I did was I looked at each library. Again, I looked at their building, their capacity, how many people they supervise, their collections, all their statistics, and we graded each one based on that, even their population, their service population. And what we came up with was that Irwin and Coates kind of fall into one category in size, building size, service population area. Andrew kind of fell in the middle, and then Dunn was on the top side of that. So we looked at what our requirements are going to be moving forward for these positions, and we, at the very least, need to make them a librarian position. And a librarian here at the main library starts out at around $39,000. So we said that's going to be our starting salary for our branch managers 1, and then we'll give each one, branch manager 2, branch manager 3, one bump up. So it'll be grade salary 22, 23, and 24. So that's how we came up with that. And so that is in alignment with what we have here. But we are really just trying to figure all this out without really a template for how to do that. Okay? 13.8% difference between last year's budget and this year's. And again, I have to say, there are some of these factors that we don't know 100% for sure. We're going to have to figure some of it out. In terms of, just say, utilities, they gave us an average of what?
I have a problem with 13% budget increase. They need to cut the fat somewhere. I would recommend sending those budgets back, cut the fat out of them, bring them back later. That's my opinion. Ask the rest of the board what they think.
And the 13% is just for Andrew, right? 13% increase is just for Andrew's
Just for
budget.
Andrew.
Right, based on their recommended budget for this year compared to their approved budget last year. And I think we would need to go back and look at the specific line items that they were recommending an increase. Some of those items may not be necessary based on the consolidation. The only thing that, what that does is there's a reduction in the formula based on each person's share. So they're still going to pay the lion's share this month, and then the following year, we will have an actual budget that we will be going on for each of the branches. And so we'll have a better idea of what our costs are related to the operation of each of those branches.
And I would agree with that. I think, I understand this is a proposed budget, so there's going to be some things in there that we really don't know for sure. I would like to see, this is increased due to move up when they're transferred to our scale as far as their salary, how much the benefits increase. So I would like to see, may or may not be a lot of fat in there. It may be a result that naturally is going to come with the transition. So I think if we could see that on a line item basis, as you mentioned, Mr. Trout, I think that would help us better understand.
Yes, we have some time. We can work on that prior to the 12th to break that down for you.
I don't, excuse me, may I speak?
Yes, ma'am.
I don't foresee if we do go forward with going back and looking at budget for libraries, that it would be an increase of 13%. I don't foresee that right now. But I think that we need to go back and look at it and see what's what, because I want to see this consolidation go through. But I don't want to end up with any hidden costs for the county, because that would affect our budget as well. So don't give up, and it's going to happen. We just got to make sure that we sustain this, not just push something forward and not be able to sustain it.
Right, and I think you look at, when I look at just a quick review of some of the items, for example, the salary and wages part-time, there's about a $9,500 increase for the new part-time staff for Andrew. So out of the $32,000, that's almost a third, of that increase of $32,000 relates to part-time staff. There is a corresponding state retirement of about $5,000 additional. So there's almost half of what the additional cost is. So I think that we can, and then $12,000 for medical insurance. So I think we can go back and highlight specifically where the differences are as it relates to the budget.
And there were some things in their budget that they asked for that we could not do, like they get a employee bonus. We don't do employee bonuses here. That did not transfer over. This year they were getting a tuition reimbursement if you go back to school. We don't have that in our budget. So they're not getting everything that they asked for. We try to
That's what I'm saying. Let's go through this. Let's go through these budgets and things that we don't think they need. Let's earmark them. Let's get them out of there. The medical insurance, is that their rate? Is that Andrew's rate, or is that our rates?
Under the column, the 22-23 budget, if consolidated, that's our rates. The ones to the left of that would be what they reported to me that they pay in benefits. Or that they get in benefits, excuse me.
But I think bottom line, your point's taken. We will dig into this and show you the locations where funding is different. There are some items that we include that they're not in their budget, and so I think the information is here. We just need to provide it in a little bit different format so that you can see, add another column to show you where the differences occur in the recommended consolidated. Then we'll analyze whether or not that's an appropriate change.
will we be able to add that to the work session on the 12th as well?
Yes, yes. Well, and
It's
that,
hard to approve the
No, no,
consolidation
right.
if you don't have a budget. It's,
right, and I think that's, that's part of what will come before you
Okay,
is the
yeah.
approval of the budget amendment that goes along with this action.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. So let's move on to the Irwin Public Library. Did we do Coach yet, or did we just do Andrew? Did we do
I think
Coach?
they're all in there.
Coates is after Irwin.
Okay, did we? Okay, we didn't talk about Coach. Okay. So currently Coates operates at limited capacity and hours. The county's goals for the Coates Public Library is to increase their hours of operation, increase the size and improve quality of their collections, and expand their programming. They currently have 3 part-time staff members. We plan to move one of these employees to a full-time position and increase 2 part-time staff members to 29 hours per week. So we will keep all their employees. One will move to, again, full-time, and 2 part-timers will get a few more hours. Their total salaries and benefits will be $112,000. And then office supplies, roughly $1,500, programming supplies, food provisions, anything they need for programming for all ages would be about $7,200. Their library collections, their books, media, $12,870, professional memberships and training, $856, and all office equipment and functions, including leases, postage, copiers, credit card machines, cash, all the things I could possibly think of. That a lot of these are one-time purchases, but I included everything that I could possibly think of that they were going to need that they don't currently have. Or around $4,600, and utilities and janitorial supplies are about $5,110. So if you look down at the bottom of that sheet, the recommended budget for the town of Coates is $146,845, and their current budget is $36,038. So this is one of those odd ones that we talked about earlier. So if we were to ask them to pay 2/3 of the $146,000, they would have to come up with $97,887. That's almost 3 times what their budget currently is. So since they can't do that, we're going to ask them to pay their entire $36,000 budget. They're going to contribute that back to us. In year 2, 1/3 of the $146,845 equals $48,943. Again, more than their $38,000. $36,000, we're going to ask them to pay the entire $36,000 both years. And then the following year, we will assume all of their budget needs. Does that make sense to you? It is a little confusing, and each one of these 3 are a little bit different. All right, so moving on to Irwin. Irwin and Coates are very similar. Irwin currently operates at limited capacity and hours, just like Coates. The county's goal for the Irwin Public Library is to increase their hours of operation, increase the size and improve quality of their collections, and expand their programming. They currently have 1 full-time employee. We plan to hire 2 part-time staff members at 29 hours each week to augment that staff. The total salaries is $115,790. The reason this one is a little different than Coates is because, according to our personnel ordinance, anyone that finishes a degree that's directly related to their job position gets an increase in pay, and the manager at that branch will complete hers within the first few months of being employed as a county employee. So I just went ahead and factored that in. The office supplies, $1,500, just like Coates. Program and supplies, food and provisions, $7,200. Their book collections are the same as Coates at $12,870. Professional memberships and training, same as Coates, $856. These are pretty much the same as the Coates Library. But let's look at their budget. So their budget is slightly higher than Coates. Their recommended budget is at $149,111. Their current, their 21-22 budget was $69,405. So again, the 2/3 of the $149,111 would be $99,397. That exceeds what they paid this year. So they would be allowed to pay the $69,405, which was the entirety of this year's budget. year two, 1/3 of the $146,000 is 49,670. That is less than what they paid in their budget this year, so they would be allowed to pay that amount. And then the following year, we would assume all those responsibilities. Any questions about that?
Any questions about the Irwin budget or the coach budget?
All right. So the fifth budget involved in the consolidation process would be making sure that we have the resources that we need here at the main branch to support adding 61%. We're going to increase our staff size potentially up to 61%. We're going to almost double our budget. That's a lot of extra work for our library staff here. And when I created this budget for our library, I did have in mind that all 4 libraries were coming in. And they still may be coming in, so I didn't make any changes assuming. But I will say that what I'm going to present to you doesn't mean that on day 1 of approval, I'm going to run out and try to start recruiting these positions, because I don't know that we're going to need them all. It's going to depend, and it's going to be a trial and error. And I would like to start off with the minimum of what we need, but have the option to bring in more if we need it. But I will promise you that I will do this as conservatively as possible, and we will not hire any position that is not absolutely needed and justified. So, but it does look like a lot. So I did want to preface that with that statement. So consolidation will have a significant impact on our account management and budget processing. Instead of having one department, we're essentially going to have 5 departments. If taking on Coates, that's if we take on everyone. If taking on Coates, Irwin, and Andrew, as well as hiring our support staff, we will nearly double our budget and increase our staff size by 61%. And we propose that the admin assistant position, which is currently a grade 19 with a starting salary of $38,875, should be reclassified to a higher grade, perhaps a 23, with a starting salary of $45,877. And I have had a conversation with Ms. Honeycutt about this. I didn't really have a context for how admin assistants work in the county because I've only worked in this department. But with a conversation with her, I do now understand that this position, even at this point, without taking them in, handles a lot more budget than some of our lower level admin assistants. And I think regardless if we consolidate it or not, I think that would be something that we would eventually have to look at, because right now I can't retain anyone in that position for more than a few months. I'm starting on my 4th one in 2.5 years. Our admin assistant's last day is Thursday. And the problem is if you hire someone in with the skill set that you need to be able to do this work, they are going to get trained and they're going to move on. And then you just start all over with retraining, and it can be a very difficult situation. I know you hear about that all the time all over the county with different positions. But if you bring in consolidation, you're bringing in a whole another problem. I'd also like to consider the library assistant, the library's assistant library director, which is Joanna. Joanna currently serves as assistant library director, and she also serves as assistant librarian. So she basically has 2 jobs, and she does a great job of toggling those. But in addition to her upper management and responsibilities, such as assisting and planning, organizing, coordinating balanced programs of library services, she's also doing all the IT stuff in our library. And I think her position could, in this situation, be better used for upper level management and grant writing. And then we hire on someone to handle the computers, the IT part. So we would pull that away from her, hire someone on that could handle those smaller tasks, and let her concentrate on bigger opportunities. One thing that we really want to focus on this year, grant writing. There's tons of money available for libraries. Oftentimes, there are no matching funds for these grants, but it takes a tremendous amount of time to write these grants and to manage these grants. But the money's there if we have time to do it. But now we want to do this for all the libraries. This is going to take a lot of time. So I would like to put her in a position where she can concentrate on making the county more money, saving the county money by focusing on grant writing and some, again, upper level tasks. So if we did do that, the systems librarian would be classified as a grade 24 with a salary range starting at $48,171. And that was in the grade salary table for the lowest level IT technician that is in the grade table. Also, since the county will now be responsible for cleaning services at each of the branches, we propose hiring a full-time custodian that will travel to each of the branches to perform standard indoor facility cleaning. I've worked with Kenneth over in facilities to be able to get this information, but we propose that we hire that position full-time at a grade 11 with a salary range starting at $25,546, and this person would travel the county each week for cleaning purposes. And finally, we will need to hire 2 part-time library assistants to assist with cataloging repairs because now we have bigger book budgets, there are more items coming in, and the main purposes of these assistants will be to fill in absences at the branches. Right now, if they are short of staff in another library, I'll use Irwin as an example, if that one librarian who works there has to be out, she has a sick child, the library closes. We do not want that. That's a county department now. We do not want to close that library because there's a sick child. We would want to send someone over to be able to cover that library. And we need staff to be able to do those things. And we can assume that vacation times when people are out, busy seasons, that we will need that employee. We will also look at hiring and again, this will probably depend on whether or not all 4 come on board. But one of the promises or one of the goals that we wanted to make sure that we covered was that they had enough staff for programming. Right now, they are all working on shoestring budgets and very limited time. And as things pick up and become busier, they may not be able to provide their programs. If that's the case, we want to be able to send someone over to do programming. So maybe you have one children's program specialist that travels the county, and one day they're in Coates, and one day they're in Irwin, and one day they're in Anger, and they travel around and they do a program each place, and we share them with all the branches. But again, that's something we won't know until we know who all's coming on and kind of drill down to what those actual needs are going to be. I would like to consider that very carefully before we move forward, but I would like the option of that to be considered. So basically, if you look on the last page of this, let's just look at the total cost. So just say, for instance, we did hire all those positions for the main branch. I just included those numbers just for the sake of having some real numbers. But the year 1 expenses, which would be 1/3 of the budgets, where that applies for us for our part of the branch library budgets for year 1, and all of our budgets would come up to $669,028. For year 2, $882,324, and for year 3, $1,161,673. And again, these are estimates because we really don't know that in year 2 that the budgets won't be less than they were in year 1. So that's what I have in terms of budget.
Any additional questions or comments?
I guess the obvious question for me, Mr. Trapp, would be with the projected increase in budget with the consolidation of cost, that's something that we will feel like we'll be able to meet those requirements.
Yes, I believe we'll outline the specific areas based on the expected start times, and I need to get a little better timeline from Ms. McCauley as regards to when what new staff positions for sure will be at in the timeline, and then we can figure out exactly where we're going to cover that from.
Thank you.
All right.
All right, thank you.
I have one more for you. Let's see. So now, this one will be a little easier. Our North Carolina Cardinal Memorandum of Agreement is up for renewal. So as you know, North Carolina Cardinal is a consortium of North Carolina public libraries that shares resources, an online catalog, and an integrated library system. An integrated library system is our management system for our patrons, our catalog. And we share this with other member libraries. The mission of this program is to maintain and continually develop a working, efficient, and sustainable catalog, database, and patron management system for public libraries and library staff within North Carolina. It is a program of the State Library of North Carolina and is supported by the Institute of Museum and Library Services under the provisions of the Federal Library Services and Technology Act. So NC Cardinal basically provides us an alternative to a higher price independent library system management vendors. Prior to us joining NC Cardinal back in around 2014, Harnett County was paying approximately $30,000 a year to our ILS vendor. And that system only allowed us to share materials here in Harnett County. It didn't give us any access outside of Harnett County. And even with a 5% increase in this year's amount that we would owe NC Cardinal at $11,359, it is still a considerable difference 8 years later. That's a significant savings for the county, and plus we get a lot more benefits from it. NC Cardinal facilitates resource sharing among participating libraries and expands library use because it provides access to an immense selection of materials. The Harnett County Public Library currently has, and this is everyone in our system, has 201,422 items in our collections. But as a member of NC Cardinal, Harnett County Library card holders have free and convenient access to 7.7 million items. So if we don't have a specific item that you want, we can probably get it for you, and it's pretty quick and convenient. This allows us to focus more on mainstream materials needed instead of trying to order things that maybe only one or two people are interested in ordering. So it saves us money and it helps us to focus on more popular items instead of, again, purchasing things that may not be as popular. So in the past 12 months, our Harnett County Library card holders have borrowed 10,745 items from outside of Harnett County, and other member libraries have borrowed 10,585 items from us. So you can see it's a pretty nice trade-off. Like, we're sending almost as much as we are receiving. We're a little bit up on the receiving, but that's a nice balance. This system really works for Harnett County. So again, our NC Cardinal membership contract with the State Library of North Carolina is renewable each July for the upcoming year, and we just ask that you would consider approval of this renewal contract, allowing us to provide Harnett County citizens access to this vast collection of materials through NC Cardinal. Do you have any questions?
And I can tell you the Cardinal system does work because I've used it. There was a book I wanted. It was in Buncombe County, which, if you're not familiar with Buncombe County, that's Asheville. We didn't even have it we had never purchased it. And I put in a request. They sent it here. I think it took maybe a week and a half, but I got to read the book.
It is a beautiful system, and we have been very pleased with the benefits that it gives our citizens. Never had a complaint about it.
And this is the same agreement we've got with Cardinal right now, right?
Yes, sir.
If it's a consensus of the board, we'll put this on the consent agenda. No other questions? All right, very good.
All right, so
Thank you.
The next up is a Bright Ideas grant, and Joanna is in charge of that grant, so she's going to come and talk to you a little bit about what we plan to do with that.
Good morning. All right, so the Harnett County Public Library has the opportunity to apply for a State Library of North Carolina Bright Ideas grant. The purpose of this grant is to inspire and galvanize libraries with an opportunity that will allow for the design and implementation of creative solutions and innovative ideas to solve unique problems in their community. So what we are asking for permission to apply for this, the reason why we are asking to apply for this grant is so that we can request funds specifically to implement lending programs with a focus on community health and well-being. We would like to purchase items and reading materials that will encourage and educate community members on various aspects of health, including mental health, physical health, infant and child health, and also fitness gaming. So as an institution that prioritizes equitable and inclusive access to materials, the library will use this program to support the health goals of citizens of all ages and backgrounds in the county. We are specifically requesting from the state library $13,585 for this grant, but there are no matching funds required by the county, and there will be no need for ongoing funding beyond the scope of the grant once it's finished. Any questions?
Any questions? Okay, well, no questions from the board. We'll add it to the consent agenda for Tuesday.
All right, thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you. All right, Mr. Blevins, talk to us about the needs assessment study.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, board members. Thanks a lot for having me an opportunity to be here to discuss the project ordinance for the animal shelter needs assessment study and conceptual design. Before I get into that, let's get a little background going backwards. Back in probably mid-April, we did an RFP to attract firms that would be interested in helping us do this needs assessment and conceptual design. The needs assessment looks at all the data that is associated with animal shelters in Harnett County, and it's in its comparison to state requirements, those kind of things. So it looks at our euthanasia rates, how many animals we intake, how many we take out, how many are adopted, those kind of things. So they're looking at all that. They'll look also at budget, how we pay people, what it costs us to operate our vehicles and all those type of things. So there's a lot of statistics involved, and what they'll do is they'll take that information and then they'll come up with these are your needs for a shelter that meets new requirements, new modern requirements. And if you all have been to the shelter, I think most of you have come by one time or another. Our shelter is fairly old, and then we've had an addition, I think, in 2005. So we're always over capacity, and that creates other things. So this needs assessment will tell us what may be the need for the county, whether it's I'm just using numbers, a 6,500 square foot shelter or 10,000 foot shelter. They'll also help us to find an area, a piece of property that the county, I assume the county would already own, and they would help us look at that and see, access and where it's placed at and what that means, because you don't want to put a shelter close to a residential area. We'll all get complaints about barking dogs because they bark all night. So anyway, that's where we're at, and the RFP was done. And we sat down. We actually got two respondents, and the two respondents, the county manager and the assistant county manager and myself, sat down and looked at all of them, and we chose to go with Shelter Planners of America. They're out of Texas. They have a good track record of doing this, and this is all they do. They don't design. So that's the point is, the conceptual design will not be a sealed design. It will be just a conceptual, give you an idea. They will come up here for a visit. They've already given us the list of statistics they want. So the thing will be that they will give us an idea of where we're headed. And then what you do, if the board pleases at some point in the future to build a shelter, then we'll just use that design and start off for the next RFQ, which will bring an architect in. So doing a project ordinance, the whole idea of that is connecting the needs assessment with the next step would be the RFQ to design it. Then the next step after that would be construction. So it would all be connected through that amount. So the current amount requested is $26,750, and again that'll cover the needs assessment and conceptual design. Is there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Blevins?
Just one. What kind of timeline are we talking about here for this study?
Generally, it'll take 3 to 5 months. 3 to 5 months is what we discussed on the phone several times. They're biting at the bit now to get other travel plans to get here.
Okay.
And
So I'm hearing that if and when we approve this, they would be ready to go right away.
we're getting the statistics ready for them now. So as
Okay.
soon as it's signed, we will get them scheduled to come here. The other thing I forgot to mention is that conceptual design will actually give us an estimated cost, and that's really what I think we all need to figure out how much money it's going to really cost. So, and it'll be updated with today's construction standards. That's a very good question.
So basically, we're talking 3 to 5 months is what I think I heard you say.
Yes, sir.
That's been y'all's discussion. Yes.
That's what our been discussion is. Hopefully,
Very good.
Nothing gets in the way. But
Sure, I understand. Thank you.
But it'll be something. It'll be a higher priority for us, and to get them here and get that information. That information is important to us.
Great. Thank you.
Well, if no one else, or if no one has any questions, we will put this on the consent agenda for approval on Tuesday. Thank you, Mr. Blevins.
Thank you very much.
All right. We'll talk about the overtime.
Good morning. I'm Kelly. Paul could not be here today, so I'm standing in for him. We are here to request a waiver for the requirement for employees to have 80 hours of comp time prior to being paid for that. This would just be for July and August. We were given some ARPA money in the amount of $125,212.64. We're required to use that money during the months of July and August, and our food stamp department is drowning right now due to the pandemic and the extra food stamps that have been allocated to citizens. And so we're asking that they be able to work overtime and use this $125,000 to be paid for that, as opposed to being given comp time.
Any comments, questions?
Can't say no to that.
I think that's good use of the money.
Good use, very good use.
Very good use. Okay. All right. We will put that on the consent agenda for Monday then,
All right.
or for Tuesday. Excuse me. Thank you. All right, Mr. Ward, you want to talk about the engineering consultant agreement? And before you get started, I failed to add this to the agenda. We want to talk about the next thing on here too, the ARPA grant acceptance for $3.8 million. So we'll make that item 13 and discuss that after we talk about the consulting agreement.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Just to give you some background on the engineering consultant agreement for MBD, this is actually phase 2 of that contract. You have previously approved phase 1 for $210,000. This is for the expansion of the wastewater treatment plant here in Lillington. If you remember, that project is estimated to be over $60 million cost. And you have previously approved the project ordinance allocating the engineering funds for this anyway. And that's over $3,240,000 is the estimated cost of the entire engineering consultant cost. So just to give you a reference, that's about 5% of that cost, of that total project cost. So that's very reasonable in engineering cost. Some firms would be 15 to 20% if you went with a real big national engineering water and wastewater firm. So, or an architectural firm for that matter. So those professional services can get very expensive. But as I said, this is task order number 2, which is the design and final design stages of the project. There will be a task order number 3 as well, once that covers bidding and construction and project management. Once we get into that phase, that will be the next phase. So this is task order number 2. The permitting's already been done. We're in the throes of getting involved in this right now, and hopefully we'll have an approval authorization to construct the project within the next 9 to 12 months. That's our goal, and we need to get there as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, DEQ, like a lot of state agencies now, are short-staffed because of COVID, and the pandemic has made engineers and other people in their staff in really short supply. But anyway, we're getting there and working hard to get that completed as soon as possible. So this phase 2, or task order number 2, is for $1,485,000 that needs to be considered by the board. Any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Any questions for Mr. Ward? All right, with no questions, we will add this to the consent agenda for Tuesday for approval.
All right, thank you. Last week, we got notice of our ARPA grant acceptance and offer that needed to be approved by the board for the $3.8 million that was appropriated from state funds, the state ARPA funds, for this same project, for the North Harnett Wastewater Treatment Plant Expansion Project. So the board had approved a prior resolution where we applied for the money. We also applied for an additional $1.2 million of ARPA funds and a $15 million grant. And if you also remember, the county in its ARPA funding committed $5 million to that project as well. We estimate our cost is going to be somewhere just shy of $30 million, just the county's portion of that $60 million cost. So we have not heard back from the DEQ funding. I mentioned the $15 million loan and the additional $1.2 million grant. We'll hear back from that in the fall. So hopefully we'll get those funds as well. But this is the actual 3.8 offer and grant acceptance. I prepared a resolution for the board to consider, and really just signing off at that point and saying that the board and the county will administer the project and comply with all the federal statutes and requirements to use this money. Be glad to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions about this grant? Any objections to accepting $3.8 million? All right, we will add this to the consent agenda for July the 5th.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Ward. Thanks, Steve. All right, Mr. Lockamy, you're up.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Everybody's doing well this morning. I'm going to talk about the organizational restructure, and I think I can do this in about an hour and a half, and so it shouldn't take us too long to get through this. All right.
It's more like 15 minutes.
Get it in PowerPoint view. Make sure I can click. Okay, last August, this board hired Rosen Associates, an economic development consulting group out of Davidson, North Carolina, to do an economic development strategic plan. That group presented a variety of different recommendations on how we step our presence up in economic development to be competitive for the recruitment of new companies, living wage jobs, and investment for the community. Those recommendations included hiring a director, which this group did. And so I came on in January. One of the recommendations was to establish a public-private partnership economic development organization to step up our competitiveness with the other counties that surround us and across the state, to be able to pull in private funding and enhance our mission. And so for the last 6 months or so, we've been working with Sanford Holthauser. This group hired Sanford Holthauser to be able to produce a report for us look at other organizations across the state, how they function, how they're funded, what they're involved in, and to help us make determinations. I've been working closely with Ernie Pearson, Rocky Lane, and David Denny of Sanford Oldhauser. We've held a variety of different public input sessions where we've interviewed various boards and commissions that we have and gotten feedback from them on how economic development functions, what works, what doesn't work, and we've gotten recommendations from the consultants. So I'm going to take you through those recommendations. So in order to talk about the recommendations, I think we need to understand what our current means of operation is. We currently have two boards that we have aside from the Board of County Commissioners. The Properties Corporation, which is a 501c3, owns real property in Brightwater Business Park and Edgerton Industrial Park. 9 members, including 2 of the county commissioners. They have one ex officio, the county manager, and the chair of one of the other boards that we have called the Economic Development Council also serves on that. They've got an operating budget of about $381,000. And then we have an Economic Development Council, which is an advisory council and consists of 9 voting members, including 2 of the county commissioners. It contains 5 ex officio members, and so your ex officio members come from the educational community. Chair of the Property Corporation also serves on that board, and they do not have a budget. They're advisory in nature. All right, so what does success look like? We've identified 17 counties in North Carolina that we know have established public-private partnerships. 4 of them happen to be on our border with Wake, Chatham, Sanford, Lee County, and Fayetteville, Cumberland. The Sanford Oldhauser report chronicled a variety of different communities as well. Those communities are in red, but those are the 17 public-private partnerships that we've identified. Those counties and cities within those areas have launched those partnerships. They've seen more private funding coming into their efforts and organization, and they've seen a little more success than they have in the past when it was just a standard public economic development organization. Okay. The best practices of these types of organizations. You'll see a variety of different things, but there's usually common denominators. And so typically these boards do have a 501c3 status for their organization. Okay, that nonprofit status allows greater ability to do private fundraising and to launch product development initiatives which insulate the county. You see a blend of public-private funding that is typically designated with the private funding over about a 5-year period. These boards typically are composed of leadership from elected officials, the business community, and the educational institutions within the county. You typically see a monthly meeting for a main board and an annual investor stakeholder meeting with advisory councils or committees that tackle a variety of different subjects. The focus of these organizations is pretty much the same focus that we have now, which is a focus on the creation of living wage jobs, establishing business parks, establishing shell buildings, and you also see an enhanced focus on growing the workforce and marketing. These organizations will typically have a variety of different talent growth and development initiatives that drive in a little bit different lane than the Council of Government, than the community college and other players in the workforce development world, to be able to basically step up our presence and grow the people within our community and attract and grow the best talent. The recommendations. These are the Sanford Oldhauser recommendations. They think the partnership should have a 501c3 status. They think that we achieve this by consolidating our county's economic development efforts into the Properties Corporation's existing 501c3 status. They recommended we rename the Properties Corporation to the Harnett County Economic Development Partnership. That name was identified in the Rosen Associates strategic plan. We would dissolve the Economic Development Council by resolution of the Board of Commissioners. We would amend the Properties Corporation bylaws and articles of incorporation to accommodate the new partnership. The Board of Directors would need to consist of 7 to 11 voting members. 2 voting positions would be county commissioners that would be nominated by the Board of Commissioners as a whole. The commissioners would serve 1-year terms with no limits on consecutive terms. 5 to 9 remaining voting positions would be business leaders, with 1 position to be tied to be a lead financial contributor of the organization. I'll speak to that in a little bit when we get towards the end of the recommendations and launching a capital campaign with the new board. The business leaders would have staggered terms, meaning 1, 2, 3-year terms. You typically see these organizations starting with the initial terms. That way you make sure you have some going off the board after a year, after 2 years, and then after 3 years, you're rolling in new business leaders all the time. They're recommending that 5 ex officio members be on the new partnership board. Harnett County School System Superintendent, the president of Central Carolina Community College, and the president of Campbell University or their designee. The county manager, Mr. Trout, and myself as the director. The Properties Corporation should adopt a resolution adopting amended bylaws and electing the 2 commissioners. And I'll explain our path forward here in just a little bit, how that works. Following the vote, the Properties Corporation members would step down from their positions. The Properties Corporation and Economic Development Council members could be appointed to serve on the partnership's main board and advisory councils. And so we would be looking for a way to set up a new partnership, but also include the members that currently serve in some form or fashion. Within 30 days, the 2 commissioners will elect the new business leaders. All right, that is as of the date of the Properties Corporation and forming, amending the bylaws. Okay. The Director of Economic Development will make the recommendations on the new business leaders, and the Board of Commissioners will have consensus prior to the appointments. This is due to the Board of Commissioners nominating the 2 commissioners to serve on the Properties Corporation Board, and the 2 commissioners nominating the business leaders at that partnership board. That's the way we do it to get consensus among all the commissioners, so you're involved and know who the business leaders are and you have a say. I will be making the recommendations. You can either accept, deny, or amend the recommendations for how we get going. After the initial partnership board is formed, the new business leaders will be elected by the board of directors other than the 2 county commissioners. The consultant's take on this was that it's a way to bring the business leaders in and give them a good stake in the organization. Put that recommendation to the side right now. We'll talk about that in a little bit, okay? To keep a smaller main board of directors, meaning the 7 to 11 voting members, the recommendations are to create advisory councils, which are pretty common. You see these in these public-private partnerships. They're recommending one for product development, meaning shell buildings and business parks, marketing. Travel and tourism is not a typical advisory board. The reason that's in there is because the economic development staff for the county currently is the staff for the Harnett County Tourism Council. And so we were thinking we would simply that's how we have a formal relationship between the county, economic development, and travel and tourism, is by simply having that as an advisory council and taking their current meetings for how they meet, and then have the staff continue to staff that board. Their intentions are, however, to hire a part-time person at some point in the future, and so that that advisory council may not be needed long term. Municipal leadership. Think about your mayors, your town managers, and for the 5 municipalities within Harnett County. That's the way to be able to give them a stake, make sure that we're marketing their communities, make sure we're bringing them into the fold. And investor relations, a very common thing that you see in these public-private partnerships. You typically will have, you typically launch a capital campaign as part of the new partnership board, and you have private funders, meaning your business community, that are funding, and so you're constantly trying to bring new businesses into the fold and look at your private funding to enhance your mission, and so that's typically a large part of it. 1 or 2 board of directors who serve on the main board would serve on each advisory council. And that would be defined in the creation of the bylaws when we set those up, and with the new partnership board. A memorandum of understanding would be entered into between the new partnership board and the Board of County Commissioners. This memorandum would define the relationship between the county and the partnership. At a minimum, it would need to include the annual appropriation, meaning the county's funding, how we would use that annual appropriation, what that money could be used for, what it could not be used for. The reporting schedule of the partnership director, meaning me, how often I would come to the county commissioners, since we would have a new board of directors for that. How often would I come to the county commissioners and update you guys on the ins and outs of economic development? And so that would need to be defined in the memorandum. The partnership would the understanding that the partnership provides an annual audit to the county, and then the understanding that the county could audit the partnership at any time. This memorandum of understanding, they're recommending that it be renewed every 3 years between the county and the partnership. The MOU could include additional items as well related to the staff, related to a variety of different things, but at a very minimum, that's what we would be looking at. The next steps. How do we take these broad goals, put them into specifics, and move the organizational transition forward? Legal staff would begin to develop the partnership bylaws. So we would immediately start to amend the partnership bylaws. I would notify the Properties Corporation and set a date in mid-August for that board to convene. I would notify the Economic Development Council members that board would be dissolved by resolution of the commissioners. I would also be advising them that they would likely resurface in some form or fashion on the main board, the advisory councils, and as stakeholders of the new organization. The business leader appointment discussions with the commissioners would need to take place immediately. I would be talking to you about those recommendations over the next week. And at the July 5th meeting, which is only 1 week away, the Board of Commissioners would start this process. You would adopt a resolution to dissolve the Economic Development Council. That would appear on the consent, likely could appear on the consent agenda. At that same meeting, you would need to identify 2 county commissioners and vote for them to serve on the new partnership board. Fast forward several meetings to the July 26th work session. Staff would update the commissioners on the drafting of the bylaws, where that stands, what that's looking like, and also the business leader appointments. Mid-August, we would convene the Properties Corporation for the last time. The group would adopt a resolution amending the bylaws, launching the Harnett County Economic Development Partnership, and electing the 2 newly appointed county commissioners. Immediately following the Properties Corporation meeting, the two newly nominated commissioners would convene at that same setting, at that same table, at that same meeting, following the meeting. They would simply stay in place, launch the very first meeting of the partnership, and they would elect the new business leaders, and that would be spelled out in the bylaws that two commissioners would have the ability to open that meeting and then nominate those business leaders immediately. Okay? Following the last Properties Corporation meeting, the amended bylaws and articles of incorporations are filed. And in mid to late August, we would convene the Harnett County Economic Development Partnership for the first meeting. At that meeting, we would tackle various items like electing the officers of the board. We would also hear a presentation from a group called Convergent Nonprofit Solutions that has helped propped up almost every single partnership like this in North Carolina. They have extensive fundraising experience and have done a good job in raising capital for these organizations. When I worked in Greenville, North Carolina, we propped up the another economic development partnership called the ENC, the Greenville ENC Alliance. That group came in and was able to raise $8.5 million that was allocated over a 5-year period. None of us thought they could do that. That's pretty high. You see others and around us that are a little less than that, but it's still about $1.5 million to $2.5 million over a 5-year period. And so it's provided substantial private sector support for being able to conduct marketing and product development initiatives. Are there any questions?
Any questions for Mr. Lockamy? All right.
We need a recommendation in order to put it on the consent agenda for the 5th about dissolving the Economic Development Council.
Do we need, what is it we need to vote on?
Yep, so there's two items.
It'll be 2 items.
Okay.
One would be dissolving the Economic Development Council, and the other would be a regular agenda item to appoint the 2 commissioners. And in between now and July 26th, I'll be talking to you about the business leader appointments. I don't, my thinking is that we have, I'll just be straight with you and tell you what I'm thinking to not keep it a secret from you. We have current business leaders that are already serving on the Properties Corp and Economic Development Council, and I think that there's a way that we essentially salvage those relationships with those companies that have been serving. My recommendation will be to put those folks on the initial board of directors, and then have a 5th position that would be done from a fundraising initiative. That would put a 7-member voting board initially for the partnership. And it also paves the way for us to bring future businesses in from the fundraising effort to help fund the organization. And so it's a way to kind of start small, get it stabilized, and move it forward. You can think on these recommendations, and we can certainly look at them in the future as we tackle each individual item at your future sessions.
All right, is it agreeable to add, yes ma'am.
Question, you're gonna provide the recommendation with names for business leaders on the board?
Yes, ma'am. And so, if you, I've already secured commitments from these business leaders should the board want to take that recommendation. And those business leaders are Jeff Whittington with First Federal Bank, Phyllis Godwin with the Godwin Group, Scott Nelson of Gould and Goodrich here in Lillington, and Dan Camp with Bonedum is working out of the Raleigh office. So he's recommended another fellow named Jake Mays. Jake Mays is a CFO of Bonedum. I've secured his commitment as well. Ernie Pearson knows Jake Mays and has worked with him on multiple expansions in the Triangle area over the years when he's worked for other companies. And so those four, should the board decide to appoint them, are all willing to serve on the initial partnership board as the current business representatives for the Properties Corp and ED Council.
Well, I think that's a good list because I'm very much familiar with their work on the economic development board. But I have one more question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
What role will Angie play in this?
So Angie is is my number two.
Okay.
Angie is a staff member that I lean heavily on, and I see Angie continuing to be a very strong presence in this organization. In addition to Becky Parker, I've grown to really love my staff and respect them and love the value that they both bring. And so they've got different strengths, just like me. And together, I think we're able to work well together. We would be hiring a marketing person that would also be coming into the organization as well. That would help sell the efforts internally and externally. And one more thing that I'll hit on that I did not hit on is we staffing the organization with board members and main board members and advisory councils. I think that's a way that we can potentially, that's how we look at our diversity, geographic diversity, gender and racial diversity as well, to be able to make sure that we are getting broad representation on the board. And so I think we're setting it up in such a way where we can look at all those things as the organization moves forward to make sure that we have an organization that truly represents the people within the community.
Well, I certainly appreciate that, simply because there are minority businesses in this county, but there has never been I've seen anything where the Economic Development Department or this county looked forward or even reached out to these minority businesses. In order for us to go forward or move forward, we must do it, and we must do it right. I recommend you, and I think that this plan is a good plan. And it's time for us to put together some kind of plan in this county that will move this county forward in economic development. We have got to create jobs. We have got to create jobs, and we have got to be in a position where companies can look at Harnett County and see Harnett County as a county that the businesses can draw from, as well as our citizens, and including all of our citizens. I thank you.
Thank you. If y'all don't mind, I'd like to say one more thing. I just want to commend the current members of the Properties Corporation and the Economic Development Council. Those folks on both boards have put in a lot of work for the county over the years. They've done a really good job, and that this in no way is by. It's just, I think setting a new partnership board will help us in a variety of ways. And again, I think there's a way to make sure we're bringing those folks into the fold, making them stakeholders of the organization. But they wouldn't be devoting their time and energy to those boards if they didn't love the county and care about it. And I want to make sure I acknowledge their service. And I think that at one of the first board meetings of the new partnership, we need to find a way to formally recognize their service.
I agree. I definitely agree, because I know the members of the board, and I know they're very professional people. And I would say, from observing them for a number of years, all of them are very concerned, and their concerns are the same as mine. And that is to see this county create more jobs and more industry here for the citizens of this county. I never doubted that at any time. But I think that with their plan and reorganizing it all, this gives us more tools to use to get to where we need to get to, because we need it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we need to add the resolution to dissolve the ED Council to the Board of Commissioners. And then will the board be ready to discuss the appointments of the two commissioners to the partnership board on the 5th? Okay, we'll add that to the regular agenda then. All right. Thank you, Mr. Lockamy. Okay, Mr. Trout, the manager's report.
I think probably the biggest thing that working right now is as we continue to work with library consolidation, finalizing items and working with staff as we begin to create the new positions that were authorized and begin to get their job descriptions and other information necessary so that we can begin to advertise for some of those positions. Quick reminder, remember next week's meeting is the 5th. It normally would be the 4th, but because of the holiday, it's moved to the 5th. So office will be closed on the 4th. So we'll see each of you on the 5th.
I've got a question about the proposed agenda for the
Yes.
5th under new business.
Mm-hmm.
Is that,
I forgot to remove that. That's on the consent agenda.
it's on the consent agenda?
Yes, sir.
Okay, all right. Any other questions or comments?
Mr. Chair, I do have one question I'd like to follow up on, if I may.
Sure.
Where are we, or have we had any feedback with regard to the Riverside project? You know, I know we set some funds aside from our ARPA money for that, but in the meantime had applied for a couple of grants. I'm a little bit concerned with how long it's taken to hear back from those grants. I certainly would love to have that money, but at the same time, we're getting into hurricane season again. Those folks have some serious needs. We've kicked that can down the road for years and years in this district, and I just think we need to begin to move on this project.
I'll have assistant county manager, Coley Price, talk to that. He received information as it relates to those grant applications.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you for that question. I did receive word yesterday that we did not receive the two grants that we applied for.
Okay.
In talking with Commissioner McCoy just to touch early this morning, first of all, I appreciate you bringing that up. County manager and I have kind of looked at this as putting a project ordinance together. As you're aware, ARPA funds are available, and there may be some other funds that we look at as well to see about the total amount. We had earmarked at that time about $500,000 to look into this. That is something that we will put on top of our RT. I know Brent and I are looking to put in the project ordinance back to you just as quick as we can. I will grab our county engineer, Bill Dreixler, and we will put together a game plan, and I'll see if we can get that project moving just as quick as we can.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Love to see that.
Yes, sir.
And I just want to add one more thing, if you don't. Sure. I want to meet with you to get some talking points.
Okay.
About where we at now.
Okay.
And where we are going.
Okay.
Because we owe it to these citizens. They have already called me and asked for a meeting because they know it's been some time past, and they deserve more than just not giving them any kind of word or letting them know what's going on.
Sure.
I certainly appreciate you as well as all the commissioners for and our new manager for working with this project and trying to find the funds. We have some of the funds, and I see now, and I really believe that we're going to move forward with this project. I just want to say that because there has been some message sent to these citizens in these communities that the county is going to do nothing. And I have tried to talk to them. I've got a meeting with them, and I want to secure to them that the county, as well as the county commissioners, is trying to move forward. No, we're going to move forward on this project. So thank you, and thank the commissioners too.
And I'll thank you for that, and I'll be glad to set up a meeting with any of the commissioners that want to discuss this. I'll grab our Lynn Lambert, our county engineer, and I appreciate the patience of the residents in this area. Commissioner Matthews, you're exactly right. It's time to move forward, and I think we have the funding and a game plan to make this happen.
Very good, thank you.
Anything else? Do you have a need for a closed session?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the board go into closed session for the following purposes: to discuss matters related to the location or expansion of industries or other businesses in Harnett County.
Second.
Motion and second, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposition? We will move to closed session. Order. Any further business? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Have a motion and second. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposition? We are adjourned.
To the house.
We did good with